Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, and as the return of Celtic comes ever closer this weekend, it also means that the UEFA Champions League is also close to kicking off, which means today it's time to have a closer look at Celtic's Champions League opponents. Let's talk about that. If you haven't already, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. We're trying to get towards 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We're on the road to 47,000, so if you haven't already, go down below, hit like, hit subscribe, and also, if you care to, you can join the 118 Club or Thunder Club using the link in the top line of the description or that join button beside the channel name. So the Champions League kicks off next week as Celtic take on Slovan Bratislava at Celtic Park in match day 1 of the new format of the UEFA Champions League. It is of course no longer the 6-game group stage format, but instead an 8-game league campaign where Celtic will take on 8 unique opponents rather than the 3 that we usually would take on, which means we've got to alter this series a bit this year. It's got to be a little bit different because I'm not running through 8 teams in 8 different videos. We'd be here to the end of the year. I quite enjoyed doing this series last year. We done the deep dive for Feyenoord, Lazio and Atletico Madrid, of course, in a Champions League group stage which did not go the way that Celtic planned. But this time round, I feel there's a lot more confidence and a lot more optimism as we head into this new format of the Champions League. So today, we're going to focus on 2 of the teams that we take on in the Champions League, and by no coincidence, it's the first 2 teams that we come up against: Slovan Bratislava, as already mentioned, and Borussia Dortmund. Just as a reminder before we get started, here on screen is a full list of all of our Champions League opponents this year, the dates of each fixture and the venue of said fixtures. They go from next week all the way through till the end of January, so we've got a long time to get to know our opponents, learn a bit more about them, evaluate their form. But today we're going to focus on the first 2 because Slovan Bratislava is right round the corner. So let's start with them, shall we? So our first game in the Champions League will take place at home. It's at Celtic Park as Celtic welcome the Slovakian champions to paradise. Celtic versus Slovan Bratislava for the first time since 1964. Yes, the last time that we took on Slovan Bratislava in a competitive fixture, Jock Stein wasn't even a name to Celtic fans. The Lisbon Lions didn't even exist. So much has happened. We are talking 60 years since the last time that we played Slovan Bratislava, which is nuts when you think about it. They are by far the most successful team in Slovakia. We're the most successful team in Scotland, and yet we haven't met in 60 years. Insane to think about. The last time we did meet though, Celtic were successful on both occasions. In the 2-legged affair in 1964, Celtic won 1-0 in both legs for a 2-0 aggregate victory in the 1963-64 edition of the Cup Winners' Cup. So hopefully we channel some of that luck from what was quite a unsuccessful period of Celtic's history. So last season, Slovan Bratislava set out to do what they should be doing, just as Celtic did. They won the division, they won it quite convincingly as well, the top flight of Slovakian football. 15 points, a whopping 15 points Bratislava won the league by, meaning they are by far and miles the best team in the country. They also made it to the knockout stages of the Conference League but were knocked out in the first round, so it's a big step up for them this season as they go from Conference League football to Champions League football, and both sets of supporters are, well, quite frankly, looking for more, looking for better in European competition. By winning the league, it made sure it got them to Champions League qualifiers, where they'd done a pretty good job in a tricky set of fixtures. They went up against Celje of Slovenia, Struga of North Macedonia, to then face Apoel of Cyprus and Midtjylland, of course. So 2 really good teams. An 86th minute winner in that tie against Midtjylland made sure that they got through that tricky route. They navigated it well and now find themselves in the league phase of the Champions League. However, this season in the league, it's not went as smoothly, shall we say. Because in their last game before this current international break, Slovan Bratislava, as you may have heard, were actually battered 5-0 of current second place side Zelina which raised a lot of eyebrows in the country. It raised a lot of eyebrows amongst Celtic fans, and it's shown that if the second best team in Slovakia, who were more than 15 points behind them last season, can batter them 5-0, then there's a team there that Celtic are definitely capable of beating. And here on screen is the reason why we should be beating Slovan Bratislava. Usually in Europe we go on about the financial gap and how Celtic are the underdogs. Well, in this particular fixture, we can't use that excuse. Celtic's total market value is much larger than Slovan Bratislava. The squad value is much, much higher. Celtic's highest valued player, according to Transfermarkt, is Cameron Carter-Vickers of 14 million euros. Slovan Bratislava's €3.5 million. So we're talking, 10 times the price here. We're talking somebody amongst numerous positions that could probably walk straight in to the Slovan Bratislava team. Celtic are not the underdogs in this tie. And for once, in this Champions League, I feel like there's a lot of pressure on Celtic to win this game. But it doesn't mean that we can disrespect the opposition. I mean, let's have a look at the summer transfer business for Slovan Bratislava. They've only spent roughly £1.5 million compared to Celtic's £30 million that we spent in the past transfer window. The majority of signings, as you can see, for Slovan Bratislava were on frees. And there's also been no notable departures. So there's a very similar squad to last season's successful side for Slovan Bratislava, while also adding more players. But as we said, Celtic spending 30 million quid, Slovan Bratislava spending no more than 2 million quid. Yeah, there is no complaints, there is no excuses. Celtic need to be considered favourites for this game. So just to finish up, as I've already said just there, Celtic should be and will be considered favourites heading into this game. Celtic should be winning, and if they don't win, it's not good enough, and it would be a terrible way to start our Champions League campaign, especially in recent years when we've played well against bigger sides and better sides that have spent 10 times the amount of money of us as us. We should be beating Slovan Bratislava. While saying that, in the same breath, I must say, we can't just go into it thinking it's going to be a walk in the park, thinking it's a guaranteed win. At the end of the day, they're the champions of Slovakia. They're the champions of their respective nation, and they're champions for a reason. They're in the Champions League for a reason. Because they're a good side, a well-drilled side, and a side that's stuck together through success over the past couple of years. So, yeah, for as much as Celtic spend more than them, and for as big a club as Celtic are, we should respect them. This is a side who, quite frankly, could cause an upset if we give them the room. So, an easy first game and compared to what we could have got, but one that we should still walk into with caution. And finally, did I forget to mention, Vladimir Weiss plays for Slovan Bratislava. He's the captain of Slovan Bratislava. He retires at the end of the season. Celtic, please beat him one more time. Which then brings us on to our opponents in match day 2. On October 1st, we will head to the very famous, very glamorous and fantastic Westfalenstadion, aka Signal Iduna Park, in Dortmund, North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany. The biggest stadium in Germany, famous for the yellow wall, of course, that atmosphere that is known all the world round. One of the biggest clubs in Europe, one of the most supported clubs in Europe, and ultimately a side which, very different to Bratislava, Dortmund walk in the favourites, don't they? Simple as that. Now, in competitive football, Celtic and Dortmund haven't met all that often through their history. In fact, only on 2 different occasions have the side met, both in 2-legged fixtures, which means across 4 games, Celtic have only won 1 of 4. Yes, that's right. The record as follows on screen. There you go. The last time we met, 1992, where Dortmund won both of the games. The other, Celtic won 1 of the 2 games. Back in the 80s and 90s in the UEFA Cup. So we've not met Dortmund in a long time either, 30 plus years now. It feels weird. It feels like a team that we should have played a lot more often. Now, it's no secret to anybody here that I have a bit of a liking for Borussia Dortmund. You will have seen me wearing Borussia Dortmund tops for years now on this channel if you've been watching Ryan 118. I love the Bundesliga, I love German football, and Dortmund is the side that I support when it comes to German football, just to give me a wee bit of excitement while watching it. So I feel like I can actually talk about them with a little bit more knowledge. But then again, everybody who tunes into Dime 118 knows they're not coming here for knowledge. So last season was a bit of a mixed bag for Borussia Dortmund, but on the whole, I would say more unsuccessful than successful. They're lucky to be in the Champions League this season. In fact, the only reason they are in the Champions League is because of the new format allowing 5 teams to qualify through the top-ranked nations. Germany, one of the top 2 ranked nations at this moment in time, means they get 5 teams to qualify through the league. Dortmund finished 5th last year in the Bundesliga, which, compared to their standards and the standard they set the year prior, was pretty poor. Remember, the year prior to that, they were basically on their way to becoming champions when they bottled it in the last day of the season. Last year, they finished 5th. They got knocked out of the Pokal in the last 16, but they made up for it with that very good run to the Champions League final. Yes, in case you've been sleeping under a rock, Borussia Dortmund, our second set of opponents in this Champions League campaign, are actually the finalists and runners-up of last season's competition. So on the whole, a mixed bag, as I said, but I think that Dortmund fans want more, expect more, and should get more for a club of their size. And now they're in a transition period. So everything that happened last year for Dortmund and over recent years for Dortmund kind of feels irrelevant heading into this fixture against Celtic, because everything is changing at Borussia. Where do you begin? A new manager. Edin Terzic has left. He's moved on to pastures new, but he's not the only key figure to leave the club. In fact, Dortmund have lost 3 of their most influential players of recent years. Marco Reus, who we all know and love, a servant to the club, has moved on to the MLS. Mats Hummels left after a bit of a drama and catastrophe back behind the scenes. And Niklas Füllkrug, the player who was the club's second highest scorer last season and Germany's starting striker, he's moved to the Premier League with West Ham United. So 3 of their key players are gone. Their manager has changed. Nuri Sahin is now in charge, a managerial rookie, formerly a player under Brendan Rodgers at Liverpool as well. So it's unknown what to expect from Dortmund this season, and the German season is still very early days, like even earlier in Scotland, to try and get a bit of image around them. So a really hard one to try and gauge going into this game. At the end of the day, it's still Borussia Dortmund. They still have a squad littered with talent, with internationals, with great players. Daniel Malin, the club's top scorer last season. Marcel Sabitzer, who's played for some of Europe's biggest clubs. Nico Schlotterbeck, an international centre-half. Pascal Gross, who have signed from Brighton. It's a great team. It's littered with talent, and ultimately they are still the favourites to win this tie, as they should be at the Westfalenstadion. But one thing I want to drill through: we cannot and we should not compare this Borussia Dortmund side to the side that Rangers beat back in 2021. That conversation is bound to happen. It shouldn't happen. Things in Germany change quicker than a lot of leagues, especially top leagues. Teams can be relegated or near relegation one season and they could be in the Champions League the next. It's a fast-paced league where things change very, very quickly. Dortmund have changed a lot since Rangers beat them in 2021. We can't compare it to that side. If we get beat by Dortmund, we already know that Rangers fans will be like, can't even beat Dortmund. 2 completely different sides, 2 different managers, 2 different squads. We can't fall into that habit. The start to the season for Dortmund has been okay. It's been decent. Once again, very early days to tell what's happening with Dortmund and their season. They won against Frankfurt but drew to Werder Bremen in the second game of the season. A win in the Pokal means they are 2 wins to 1 draw in competitive fixtures. What I will recommend for anybody who wants to keep up with them, keep an eye on their opening Champions League game against Club Brugge next week. And also, if you want to have more of an insight, watch their game on September 22nd against Stuttgart in the Bundesliga. Stuttgart, a fellow Champions League side, a side that finished second in the league last year. That'll be a very interesting game. Borussia Dortmund against Stuttgart. Keep an eye out on that. In terms of transfers, I've already mentioned a couple of the signings. 80 million euros spent for Dortmund in the window. It's one of their highest spending summers ever. Bringing in some really good players from the league. A couple of signings from Stuttgart. One player from Hoffenheim as well. Bayer, the striker, who's coming in to replace Niklas Füllkrug. A very good team still. A lot of money spent. It's going to make it a hard tie for Celtic. So my final opinion is as simple as this. If we can go to Dortmund, if we can go to North Rhine-Westphalia and compete with Dortmund, I'd be very, very happy. This is a game where I'd very much like to avoid an early scudding in the Champions League. I don't want to see us lose 4-5, 6-0 because that then gets everybody down. Go over there, compete. Listen, I want us to win the game, but I know that's hard. Just go over, compete, do our absolute best, and show why the 6 games following Dortmund can be ones that Celtic fans should be very optimistic about. So there you go. There is your first edition of the Champions League deep dive for the 2024-25 campaign. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned, and they'll come over random points of the next couple of weeks. So yeah, see you next time. Shout out to everybody who has joined the 118 Club or the Thunder Club thus far. Thank you for your continued support here on Ryan 118, and enjoy your moment of glory here on screen.